Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. (4:37 anti-meridium). The camera's battery icon pulsed a weak 3%, a final digital heartbeat before the ordinary world flatlined. That timestamp remains etched, the precise moment normalcy frayed at the edges. I stood at the threshold of Whispering Pines Preserve, tripod a familiar weight across my shoulder, spare power cells nestled like secrets in my jacket. January's breath, honed to a razor edge, bit exposed flesh. This ritual was mine. A 3:45 alarm, the 40-minute pilgrimage by car, the 2-mile ascent through slumbering woods to Hawk's Crest Vista, all to capture dawn's fleeting artistry. An escape, this amateur image-making, from the sterile calculus of insurance brokering. Sunrise was my muse. Or so I believed, until that particular morning. My boots grated against the frozen earth as I pushed onto the path. My headlamp cut a surgical line through the ink, glancing off the occasional reflective trail blaze. The air hung thick with the scent of pine resin and the ghost of fallen leaves, a familiar forest perfume. A delicate rime coated everything, lending a faint crunch to my footfalls. The initial mile unfolded uneventfully, my breath pluming white vapor, quadriceps singing a low burn from the steady climb. My watch face glowed. 4:52 a.m. Good progress. With sunrise still distant at 6:43, ample time remained to reach the vista, to find that perfect frame. Disquiet began where the trail bifurcated, one artery leading to Hawk's Crest, the other descending into Hemlock Hollow. Through the skeletal trees to my right, toward the hollow, an anomalous luminescence bled into the darkness. Another early photographer? Unlikely. The light pulsed, shifted, unlike any headlamp or strobe I'd witnessed. It throbbed with a cool, cerulean intensity, akin to captive lightning shimmering beneath the forest canopy. It waltzed between the trunks, projecting elongated, writhing shadows across the frosted ground. Instinct screamed, "Capture this." Whatever phenomenon played out yonder demanded documentation. I extinguished my headlamp, plunging myself into deeper shadow, and raised the camera. Through the lens, the light sharpened. They moved in defiance of known physics, splitting, merging, spiraling around ancient trees, ricocheting off branches in silent explosions. The woods flickered like some ethereal discotheque, utterly soundless. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with the settings. ISO 3200, f2.8. Shutter speed 1/60th. I fired off several exposures. The LCD screen offered only abyssal blackness, punctuated by faint, indistinct smears. It was as if the lights existed just outside the spectrum my technology could perceive. Phantom energy mocking my attempts. The logical mind offered explanations. Ball lightning, rare atmospheric plasma. Yet, ball lightning doesn't weave intricate patterns. It doesn't suggest sentience. These lights seemed choreographed, alive, engaged in some arcane ritual within the pre-dawn hush. Closer. I needed to get closer. Prudence whispered retreat. Stay on the marked path. Observe from safety. But 2 decades chasing light had taught me the extraordinary rarely rewards caution. Securing the tripod, I veered off the trail, plunging into the underbrush toward the spectral display. The terrain pitched sharply downwards, my boots skidded on frost-slicked leaves. I stumbled, bracing myself against bark rough and cold as stone. Ahead, perhaps 100 yards, the lights continued their silent ballet, maintaining that uncanny distance regardless of my pace. My lungs labored, exertion forcing sweat beneath my thermal layers despite the glacial air. Another glance at my watch. 5:14 a.m. The eastern horizon remained stubbornly black. Between the trees, the darkness felt absolute, save for those hypnotic, dancing glimmers. After another quarter hour of cautious scrambling, I saw the lights cease their movement. They hovered now within a small clearing, pulsing with that same unearthly blue-white radiance. I sank behind a fallen log, raising the camera once more. The battery indicator dwindled to 2%. One last attempt. The clearing swam into focus. The orbs hung roughly 6 feet above the forest floor, clustered like a swarm of impossible fireflies. Not fireflies, though. Each light glowed the size of a clenched fist, emitting no discernible heat despite their brilliance. Indeed, the air here felt colder, unnaturally so. I depressed the shutter. The click seemed to detonate the profound silence. Instantly, the lights reacted, scattering outwards like startled birds. But instead of dispersing, they began to spiral inward with accelerating velocity, collapsing into a tight, incandescent column stretching from the frost-kissed earth to the highest branches. The fine hairs on my arms rose. A palpable static charge prickled the air. My camera's screen winked out. Simultaneously, the spare battery in my pocket became a searing coal against my thigh. I dropped both camera and battery just as a high-frequency whine pierced the air, escalating until it resonated painfully in my molars. What followed unfolded too rapidly for comprehension. The column of light detonated outwards, a silent, blinding nova. When my vision swam back into focus seconds later, the clearing was plunged back into darkness. Yet it wasn't empty. Movement stirred the frosted leaves. Footprints bloomed upon the ground, one after another, impressed by invisible feet traversing the clearing. Their pattern defied logic, overlapping, crisscrossing, pointing in contradictory directions. Some sank deep, suggesting immense weight. Others barely skimmed the surface. My heart hammered against my ribs. The phantom steps quickened, grew frantic, a chaotic choreography performed by unseen entities. Then, as abruptly as it began, the activity ceased. The final set of impressions led to the clearing's center and simply ended, vanished. Frozen behind the log, I remained immobile for what felt like an eternity but was likely mere minutes. My hands trembled so violently I could barely aim my flashlight. Summoning courage, I finally swept the beam across the clearing. The footprints were starkly real, no figment of a stressed mind. Methodically, as if documenting evidence, I approached. The impressions varied wildly in size and morphology. Some resembled human feet, perhaps size 10 or 11. Others were disturbingly small, childlike, and some were utterly inhuman, elongated, bearing strange distal points where toes might be, their shape hinting at a gait unlike any terrestrial creature I knew. My flashlight beam snagged on something metallic near the clearing's heart. My camera lay face down, battery compartment sprung open, empty. The spare cell from my pocket was gone. The camera body itself felt arctic, colder than the ambient air, as if flash frozen. The first pallid hints of dawn stained the eastern sky when I finally gathered my nerve and my useless equipment. My watch was dead, its digital display locked at 5:14 a.m., despite a battery less than a year old. My phone showed 6:22 a.m., but the screen flickered erratically, the compass app spinning like a dervish. One last look at the clearing. The footprints remained, ephemeral evidence already beginning to soften as the frost yielded to the approaching day. By sunrise, they would be entirely gone. No photographs, no proof, nothing but the fragile architecture of memory. The hike back to the trailhead was a blur of heightened senses. I clung to the marked path, moving with urgent strides through the growing light. Every rustle became a potential presence. Every shadow between the trees seemed to writhe with hidden motion. The familiar woods felt subtly rearranged, uncanny, like a dream landscape bleeding into waking hours. I reached the deserted parking lot just as the sun crested the ridge. My car sat alone as I'd left it, but not quite. On the windshield's frosted expanse, a pattern had formed. Not the delicate, random geometry of ice crystals, but precise concentric circles, interspersed with sharp, angular symbols utterly foreign to me. By the time I located my ice scraper, the strengthening sun had begun its work. The patterns dissolved into memory before I could even think to capture them, leaving only fading mental images, elusive as dream fragments upon waking. Whispering Pines Preserve remains unvisited territory for me now. My camera, despite new batteries and cards, is inert, a dead thing. The images I thought I captured exist nowhere. My watch eventually revived, days later, but its timekeeping remains erratic, perpetually adrift. Occasionally, on crisp, clear mornings, my gaze drifts toward the distant tree line from my window, and I fancy I see faint pulses of blue-white light deep within the woods. The urge to investigate no longer tempts me. Some phenomena resist understanding, resist documentation. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed. From my desk at the insurance agency, I have a clear view of the preserve. During slow afternoons, my eyes inevitably wander to those forested slopes, replaying the inexplicable. Rationalizations, plasma, swamp gas, collective delusion crumble against the solidity of the experience. Those footprints were real. The sigils on the frost were real. Last week, a new prospective client sat across from me, seeking coverage for his photography venture. He spoke of shooting sunrises out at Whispering Pines, mentioned seeing something peculiar. Lights, he'd murmured, flickering in the trees like nothing I've ever seen. He inquired if our policies extended to equipment damage from anomalous electrical events. I sold him our most robust plan, but I also offered advice, gently suggesting he might find sunsets more rewarding. Certain locales in the deep, liminal hours before dawn are best left to themselves, places where the familiar world thins, where strange lights perform their silent rites, leaving only questions and ghost impressions in their wake. The tripod from that morning still resides in my closet. Sometimes, retrieving it, I'm struck by how cold the metal feels, unnaturally so, even in summer's heat. And if I examine the aluminum legs with painstaking closeness, I can discern infinitesimally fine markings etched into the surface, concentric circles enclosing strange angular glyphs, identical to those that briefly adorned my windshield. The thought of analysis, of labs and experts, surfaces occasionally, but invariably I return it to the darkness. Some questions, perhaps, are not meant to be answered. Some enigmas should remain inviolate. Yet I keep the tripod, a tangible anchor to the certainty that what I witnessed was real, that for a sliver of time in a frost-rimed clearing, I brushed against something profoundly other. And somewhere in the shadowed heart of the woods, those lights continue their dance, awaiting the next solitary witness drawn toward the unknown. Infinity unspooled before the Kenworth, a dark ribbon thrown across the void of the desert night. Headlamps slice the immense blackness, finding only vacant asphalt and the skeletal shapes of cacti flung wide. Just another run, weight shifting behind me, miles dissolving under wheel, or so the rhythm lulled me into believing. 15 years hauling loads coast to coast hadn't braced me for the hours ahead. Hours that would stretch taut as wire, humming with a terror I hadn't known existed. Call me Silas Vance. Since I was barely old enough for the license, I've wrestled these titans of the highway across the sleeping continent. You see things out here, adrift in the pre-dawn stillness. Ghost lights, whispers on the wind, shapes that vanish when you blink. Every driver accumulates whispers of the weird, but nothing, absolutely nothing, was prologue enough for that night. That particular emptiness along Nevada's Highway 50. It began subtly, somewhere past the second hour after midnight. 6 hours gone since leaving Salt Lake, pushing west toward Sacramento, making good time. Inside the cab, only the engine's deep thrumming and the fitful sigh of the CB radio broke the silence. I'd slipped into that familiar trance, the long hauler's limbo, conscious but adrift, tethered only to the road unwinding in the dark. Just the rig, the vast desert silence, and me. Then, twin stars ignited in the rear view. Insignificant at first, headlights are hardly novel, even in these lonely hours. But minutes bled into more minutes, and a wrongness began to prickle at the edge of my awareness. The vehicle behind held its distance with uncanny precision. My speed drifted up, then down. It mirrored me perfectly. A ghost latched to my stern. My thumb found the CB transmit button. Breaker. This is Night Owl. Got someone painting my back doors pretty steady out here. Anyone copy this channel? The airwaves offered back only a profound, unnerving stillness, not even the usual hiss. A frown tightened my brow, mirrors checked again. Still there, unwavering. Just some skittish tourist, I reasoned aloud, the words thin in the quiet cab, maybe afraid to overtake a semi in the deep dark. The unease, however, refused to settle. An hour crawled past, measured in the rhythmic blink of distant radio towers. The car remained, an unwavering shadow. I accelerated sharply. It matched. I bled off speed. It mirrored. At a desolate turnout, gravel crunching under my tires, I pulled over, hoping for a glimpse. The car eased to a halt just beyond the spill of the sodium lights, a deeper patch of darkness in the night. The moment my rig rumbled back onto the highway, Its lights reappeared, snapping back into perfect formation behind me. Sweat slicked my palms on the wheel now. This transcended strangeness. This felt deliberate, predatory. Again, the CB, channel after channel, a desperate sweep. Nothing, just the void answering the void. And then the true weirdness descended. We were traversing a particularly barren stretch, nothing but moon-scoured rock and shadow, when the headlights behind me simply vanished. Relief bloomed, fragile and brief. Then horror choked it. Lights flared anew, burning fiercely in my side mirror. It was pacing me, running parallel just yards away across the empty lane. My heart hammered against my ribs. I risked a glance sideways. Windows blacker than polished obsidian reflected the indifferent stars, swallowing any hint of who or what might be inside. "What in God's name do you want?" The shout was ragged, swallowed by the engine's drone. A futile gesture against the impossible. As if responding, the car surged forward, cutting smoothly ahead of my massive rig. Now I saw it clearly. An older machine, sleek, low-slung, lines subtly wrong, defying easy identification. Maybe something from the 70s, but twisted, unfamiliar. Its color wasn't merely black, it was an absolute absence of light. A rolling patch of oblivion that seemed to drink the beams from my own headlamps. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I fumbled for the mic again, voice shaking. "Mayday! Mayday! Silas Vance, 18-wheeler on Highway 50. Mile marker approximate 257. Vehicle harassment. Hostile intent. Anyone read me? Please respond." A crackle answered, sharp and sudden. Hope surged, then instantly curdled. Not a voice, not help. A sound leaked from the speaker, chilling me to the bone. A low, resonant hum, pulsing rhythmically beneath discordant guttural syllables that scraped against the ear, utterly alien. It lasted only seconds. Then silence slammed back down. Into that silence crept a new sound, a high-frequency whine emanating from the black car ahead. I watched, stunned, as the vehicle's rear began to flow. Metal rippled like liquid mercury, reshaping itself. An articulated appendage, metallic and multi-jointed, extended from the trunk, reaching back towards my grill. "Oh, no, you don't!" The spell broke. Raw adrenaline surged. I stomped the brakes, air hissing, tires screaming torture as 40 tons of cargo fought momentum. The black car shot past where I'd been moments before, its bizarre limbs snatching at empty air. It fish-tailed to a halt, perhaps 100 yards down the road, its form seeming to shimmer, unstable in my headlights' glare. Stillness descended again. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, breath coming in ragged gasps. I stared, mind refusing to connect the dots, refusing to believe the image burned onto my retinas. Then, slowly, deliberately, the driver's side door of the black car swung open. A figure unfolded itself into the night. Humanoid, yes, but stretched impossibly tall, unnervingly slender. Its movements were liquid grace, yet fundamentally wrong, disjointed like a badly handled marionette. It turned. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth convexity, polished, dark, reflecting the starlight like a black mirror. Thought abandoned me. Instinct took the wheel. I slammed the gear shift into reverse, tires spitting gravel, backing away with clumsy speed. The figure began to move towards me, not walking but gliding, covering ground with unnatural swiftness. Back into drive, wrenching the wheel, thanking some forgotten prayer that the road ahead was clear. I mashed the accelerator to the floor, the diesel engine roaring in protest, pushing the needle far into the red. The mirrors showed the black car, now a predator in full chase, closing the distance with impossible velocity. The CB shrieked back to life, that awful, resonant hum, the alien litany pouring from the speaker. I tore the mic from its clip, hurled it onto the passenger floor, but the sound persisted, seeming to emanate from the very air within the cab. The car was on my tailpipe now, the grotesque metal arm extended again, questing, reaching for my trailer. My speedometer was useless, buried past its limit, the whole rig vibrating on the edge of disintegration. Still, it wasn't enough. Then, piercing the despair, a glimmer. The scattered lights of habitation ahead. A town. Where I had no idea, didn't care. Civilization meant eyes, witnesses, sanctuary. I leaned on the air horn, a desperate, bellowing cry ripping through the night as I hurtled towards the first buildings, praying someone would look, someone would see. Skidding around a corner onto a main street, tires howling, I risked a final glance back. The black car was simply gone. Brakes slammed. The truck shuddered to a halt before the brightly lit windows of a small diner. Inside, faces turned, startled by my chaotic arrival. For a long, trembling moment, I sat, gulping air, braced for the phantom car's reappearance. Nothing. The street behind remained empty. The desert night suddenly quiet, save for the metallic ticking of my cooling engine. My legs felt like jelly as I climbed down. A couple of men emerged from the diner, brows furrowed with concern. "Everything okay, driver?" one asked, his voice calm. "Came in here like the devil himself was chasing you." I opened my mouth, the story clawing to get out, but the words died. How? Who would ever credit such a tale? Brakes felt soft," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash. "Locked 'em up. Sorry about the noise." They nodded, accepting the mundane explanation, and drifted back inside. I leaned heavily against the cool metal flank of my trailer, the world tilting slightly. Hallucination? Sleep deprivation playing cruel tricks? Then my gaze fell upon the trailer's side panel, precisely where that impossible arm had reached. Etched deep into the aluminum, unmistakable, was a handprint. But not human. Too many slender digits, jointed wrong, pressed with such force that the metal had yielded like sculptor's clay. I stared, the last vestiges of rationalization evaporating. This was no dream, no trick of the mind. The thing in the desert, the hunter on the highway, it was real. And a cold certainty settled deep in my gut. It wasn't done. Climbing back into the familiar sanctuary of my cab, my hand still betraying a tremor, I made a silent promise. I needed answers. Because the open road, the vast, lonely expanse that had been my life's rhythm, was no longer just asphalt and distance. It was a hunting ground. Something lurked in the darkness between the mile markers, watching, waiting. My refuge had become a place of profound terror. And as I eased the big rig back onto the highway, heading towards the pale promise of dawn. I knew with chilling clarity this nightmare hadn't ended. It had merely begun. Its aroma lingers yet in memory. The scent of desiccation and dormant particles assailing my senses the instant that ponderous door yielded. With a low groan of tortured metal, the hinges broadcast my arrival down vacant corridors. Within, illumination faltered. Meager lamps cast tentative pools of light on time-worn tables, their unsteady beams glancing off shelves thick with neglect. Volumes huddled together, seemingly undisturbed for generations. A scattering of chairs punctuated the gloom, some stripped of their padding, one listing precariously on a fractured leg. Solitude, I knew, would be my companion here. This library, forsaken by the present, breathed an air of utter desertion, precisely why I'd sought it out. I had grown weary of bright, welcoming spaces, of librarians whose smiles felt like inquiries. Here, amidst the decay, no one would challenge my passage, nor impede my exploration of every venerable binding my fingers could reach. I pursued a whisper, a name archaic and now unspoken, gleaned from the fringes of conversation. Its mere existence demanded verification. With time heavy on my hands, I harbored a hope, however faint, of unearthing something resonant. The local phantoms I chased, spectral urban myths, half-erased rumors, peculiar provincial narratives, typically dissolved into nothingness. Yet this particular quarry resonated with an intuition I couldn't articulate. It simply felt significant. That initial foray yielded only strata of dust and profound quietude. My fingers traced the spines, disturbing ancient repose. A dry cough escaped me, swallowed by the echo and stillness that amplified my own respiration. Beneath my worn shoes, the old floorboards uttered soft complaints. No other soul stirred, neither patron nor custodian. Only a solitary, aged desk near the entrance held vigil, crowned by a small lamp and a guest register. Its pages chronicled 5 years of absolute vacancy. Nevertheless, I inscribed my name, Elias Thorne. My satchel dropped onto a table with a soft thud, then began the survey of the aisles. Signage, where it existed, had mostly surrendered to time, peeling away to leave cryptic scars. Locating the repository for older records became an exercise in guesswork. I extracted tomes with frayed covers, their pages adhering stubbornly, deciphering titles that offered no enlightenment. Hours dissolved, revealing nothing but bound collections of obsolete newspapers, which I returned to their slumber. A chill permeated the air, distinct from the warmth outside. This interior always held a cooler temperature. I chafed my arms against the encroaching cold. Discovering a corner alcove furnished with a few chairs and a diminutive reading table, I selected a spot, allowing my gaze to soften, my focus to blur. Sleep remained elusive, yet consciousness drifted. Then a sound, a soft concussion, perhaps a book surrendering to gravity. I rose, scanning the surroundings. Nothing disturbed the vacant perspective. The aisle stretched onward, punctuated by the intermittent flicker of distant bulbs. A fleeting impression of movement teased the periphery of my vision, likely a trick of weary eyes. Voicing my uncertainty seemed pointless. Instead, I held my breath, listening intently. Silence reigned. Retreating to my seat, I attributed the disturbance to fatigue. On the subsequent day, I returned near the same hour, settling in to sift through more forgotten shelves. Behind a tall, awkwardly positioned bookcase, I discerned a narrow fissure. Squeezing through, I entered a hidden chamber containing materials of even greater antiquity. No window pierced its walls. The gloom here was denser, compelling me to draw a small torch from my satchel. Its beam quavered as I advanced across the rough, uneven floor. Crates overflowed with brittle journals. As I leafed through them, separating the fused pages proved arduous. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with the cloying fragrance of dampness and mold, tightening my chest slightly. A cough forced its way out after only minutes. The particulate density was overwhelming. I resolved to withdraw, planning a return after a brief respite. Turning, my gaze snagged on a silhouette behind the shelving, tall, vaguely human, yet utterly devoid of detail. No face resolved itself from the shadows, no features emerged. An instant later, after a blink, the space was empty. Again, I reasoned it was merely the capricious play of light, though a current of unease persisted. I meticulously checked behind the stacks, paced the narrow confines. Nothing. Only the mute testimony of old books and silence. I pressed onward. That evening, poised to depart, my attention was captured by a singular volume. Its spine, unusually thick, bore no title. The leather cover was a cracked and faded landscape. Attempting to open it, I found the pages cemented together. Gentle persuasion loosened a few, revealing dense script, a challenge to decipher. It resembled archaic notations, perhaps a personal ledger. The ink had bled, blurring the words. From this book emanated an odor more potent than the ambient mustiness, a scent akin to decay. A peculiar weight settled in my stomach. My pulse quickened as I coaxed another page free. No logical cause for nervousness presented itself, yet the feeling intensified. Concluding that better light and more dedicated time were required, I set it aside for the morrow. Before exiting, however, my eyes caught it again. The featureless shape, stationed at the far end of the aisle, tall and immobile. As the overhead lights sputtered, it dissolved. Perspiration beaded on my brow. I departed swiftly, resisting the urge to look back. The third day found me imbued with fresh resolve, fortified by a thermos of potent coffee. The entrance door issued its familiar metallic lament. The hall remained deserted. The desk lamp, however, cast its lonely glow, a lamp I distinctly recalled extinguishing upon my previous departure. Certainty prickled. A quick survey confirmed everything else undisturbed. Retrieving the peculiar tome from yesterday, I established myself at a table beneath one of the struggling lamps and renewed my efforts to penetrate its secrets. The script yielded slightly more under focused scrutiny. Lists of names. Some were violently struck through, others bore emphatic circles. Dates were absent, explanations non-existent, just name after relentless name. My heart hammered against my ribs, an unwarranted physiological alarm. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted unnervingly bitter. Deeper I delved, encountering more resistance from the fused pages. Applying greater pressure, I felt the fragile edges give way slightly. Then I reached a page where ink had obliterated most entries, yet one name remained starkly visible, almost gouged into the parchment. I strained to make it out, but the characters refused to cohere into any recognizable word. As I stared, the pounding in my chest intensified, sweat blooming beneath my shirt. Mentally sounding it out felt intrinsically wrong, the sequence of letters alien. Abruptly, a scraping noise erupted behind me. I spun around. A chair, previously tucked neatly beneath its table, now stood several inches askew. No draft stirred the stagnant air. I was utterly alone. A tremor began in my leg. Circumnavigating the table, I reached out and touched the chair. Its surface felt unnaturally cold. Indeed, the entire library seemed to have shed degrees. Rubbing my arms again, I returned to the inscrutable book. Later that same day, I ventured back into the hidden rear chamber, hoping to find some context for that unsettling name. While searching the crates anew, I became aware of breathing, a slow, measured cadence, definitively not my own. I froze, straining my ears. The sound originated from behind a towering bookshelf. Peering through the narrow gaps, I could discern only profound darkness. My torch flickered erratically. I tapped it sharply. The breathing ceased. For a long minute, I remained motionless. Nothing stirred. Only the frantic thrum of my own heart broke the silence. Retreat was the only sensible option. As I turned, an immense pressure descended upon my shoulders, an invisible weight bearing down. I whirled, finding emptiness. My breath came in ragged gasps. The pressure dissipated. Fatigue and tension, I told myself again, leaving the back room behind. Back in the main hall, turning more pages of the forbidding volume, I encountered the name again, inscribed near the bottom of a page. The handwriting here seemed tremulous, as though executed under duress. Focusing on it induced a prickling chill along my arms. A soft creak sounded nearby. Slowly, deliberately, I turned. It stood there at the terminus of the aisle, faceless, a blank oval surmounting what might have been a long coat or robe. The poor light obscured specifics. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just that smooth, vacant expanse. My heart threatened to batter its way out of my chest. My hands shook uncontrollably. I attempted speech, but my throat seized. Taking a hesitant step forward, I watched it remain perfectly still. I blinked. It was gone. Restlessly, I paced the library's length. Departure felt premature. The mystery exerted a powerful pull. I opened another volume, this one chronicling local lore, brief accounts of apparitions, uncanny lights and derelict structures, whispers of concealed rooms. Nothing illuminating, nothing pertaining to the name. My stomach clenched with hunger. I hadn't eaten. More coffee, now cold and stale, provoked a gag reflex. Capping the thermos, I tried to regain focus. Hours slipped by as I randomly probed the shelves. The silence grew so absolute it began to hum in my ears. Phantom footsteps seemed to echo just behind me, though turning revealed only emptiness. On one occasion, the fine hairs on my arm lifted as a rush of cold air swept past, potent enough to ruffle the pages of a nearby open book. I spun, seeking a source, an open window, a door ajar. Nothing. The ancient lamp overhead swayed almost imperceptibly. A knot of panic tightened, sweat slicked my back. My pulse surged whenever the image of that name surfaced in my mind. I couldn't even form it internally. It felt profane. At some juncture, tucked within the pages of a hefty dictionary, I discovered a note. A slip of paper inscribed with hurried handwriting. Do not speak the name in the old book. Do not try to pronounce it. Leave this place. My heart stuttered. My throat constricted. the urge to flee warred with an inexorable draw back towards the table bearing the Sinister volume. Pocketing the note, I moved slowly, deliberately, attempting to regulate my breathing. My legs felt unsteady, the pressure returning to my shoulders heavy as spectral hands. Rubbing them offered no relief. Reaching the table, I found the book lying open, still displaying that same page. The name pulsed darkly, defying comprehension. Leaning closer, scrutinizing the characters, I felt a peculiar heat blossom in my chest. My hands trembled violently. Tentatively, I touched a page. It felt coolly damp, as if having absorbed moisture from the air itself. I attempted to turn it, but it resisted. A firmer tug resulted in a slight tear, exposing script on the reverse, equally nonsensical. A faint, dry scraping sound reached my ears. A frantic scan of the room revealed nothing. The figure remained absent, alone, yet profoundly watched. Time seemed to warp. The lamps, I noticed, burned with diminished intensity. My watch, consulted for orientation, had stopped. Tapping it yielded no response. How long had I been immersed in this place? Escape beckoned, yet answers remained elusive. Perhaps transcribing the name, taking it away for external research. I retrieved a small notebook from my satchel. As I tried to replicate the alien letters, my hand shook too violently, rendering the attempt a distorted scrawl. Trying again, the shoulder pressure intensified, forcing me upright. I scanned the shadows. Nothing. Jaw clenched, I fought for slow breaths, succeeding only in panting. Enough. I would leave. I closed the ancient book. As the cover fell shut, a muffled sound, like a distant strangled moan, echoed through the stillness. My head snapped up, eyes darting in all directions. The library held only me. The desk lamp glowed with unwavering faintness. I started towards the main door, my footfalls unnaturally loud in the oppressive quiet. Halfway there, movement flickered at the periphery, down a side aisle. The figure stood sentinel once more. Blank oval face, unnerving stillness. I froze, heart hammering, knuckles white on my satchel strap. It retreated slightly, melting behind a towering bookshelf. A surge of desperate resolve propelled me forward. I rounded the corner, ready for confrontation. Emptiness greeted me. Old books, a forgotten broom, skeletal crates. The floor, thick with dust, bore no recent impressions. Slowly, I backed away, a dull ache blooming behind my eyes. At the exit, my hand closed on the handle. It refused to turn. Stuck. Panic flared anew. A glance over my shoulder revealed flickering lamps. Then a whisper, insidious, seeming to shape my own name, Elias. Uncertainty warred with terror. I wrenched the handle with all my strength. The mechanism groaned, then yielded. I stumbled into the corridor. The air here, while still stale, felt marginally less oppressive. Following the passage, I reached the final exterior door. It opened without protest. Outside. Late afternoon, perhaps, under a sky the color of slate. The street lay deserted. I drew deep breaths, the cool air a balm on my face. My heart began a slow retreat from its frantic pace. Several blocks away, I collapsed onto a park bench, striving for composure. Opening my satchel, I examined my findings. The warning note felt brittle in my trembling fingers. The notebook page displayed my failed transcription, the letters seeming to writhe, subtly altered. An explanation remained beyond my grasp. My hands still bore a tremor. With a jolt, I realized the untitled book remained within those silent walls. A fleeting thought of returning, of trying again, flickered and died as a familiar weight settled onto my shoulders, even here, exposed to the open sky. I scanned my surroundings. No watchers, no spectral forms, nothing overtly amiss. Yet the pressure lingered, faint but undeniable. Closing my eyes, concentrating on stillness, I felt it recede slightly. Rising, I walked aimlessly, circling the block. Returning was unthinkable. The blank visage, the inexplicable phenomena, the heart-stopping fear, I wanted no more of it. My chest remained tight, constricted. I rubbed my arms against a sudden chill that belied the season. Heading homeward, I carried only questions and a profound sense of unease. No tangible proof, merely the fragile architecture of memory and these bewildering notes. In the ensuing days, I kept my distance from that forsaken place. Online searches for the name I'd glimpsed yielded nothing. My notes remained cryptic, the warning slip a baffling artifact. The events defied rational explanation. The sounds, the apparitions, lacked any discernible cause or trickery. The thought of returning with company occurred, but who would possibly consent? The library was too peripheral, too forgotten, its existence barely a rumor. Forgetting proved impossible. At night, the pressure on my shoulders would return. Small, insignificant sounds within my own apartment, the scrape of a chair, the rustle of paper, became sources of intense anxiety. I'd rise, investigate, find nothing. Standing in the familiar darkness of my own home, I felt the same tension, the same gnawing uncertainty. Answers remained elusive. Perhaps someday courage or desperation will drive me back, but not yet. For now, silence guards my experience. I actively suppress the memories. Yet, recalling that ancient tome and the unutterable name nestled within its decaying pages still sends my heart into a frantic rhythm. I never voiced it. I never will. It began the first night, the auditory phantom on the boards. I remember Elias standing there, gripping the aged mahogany of the balcony rail, seeking solace in the night air after the day's long exertions. Beneath his worn boots, the planks sighed, a familiar complaint of old wood. Then came its shadow sound, another sigh, perfectly timed, yet impossibly delayed, mirroring his own shifting weight. An anomaly. Perhaps the wind, he reasoned, or the house settling its ancient bones. But the cadence was too precise. A spectral mimicry. A coolness, unrelated to the evening breeze, traced a line down his nape. He willed it away. Solitude defines Elias's existence here. The house itself isn't vast, but the sprawling yard, sentinel trees guarding its perimeter, lends it an air of grand isolation. From the balcony, the backyard unfurls. By day, a sanctuary, sunlight dappling through leaves, avian calls stitching the quiet. Night, however, transforms it utterly. The woods beyond plunge into a profound, absorbing blackness. Leaves rustle with unnerving clarity. The balcony's timbers seem to hold their breath, brittle under the starlight. His second night, near the witching hour, Elias ventured out again. A foolish notion, perhaps, confronting the nocturnal balcony might breed familiarity, dispel the unease. Flashlight clutched tight, he stepped onto the wood. One step, solid. A second, unremarkable. He paused, heart hammering against his ribs, listening. The beam quivered. Seconds stretched. A faint groan emanated from the plank beneath his left foot, though he stood nearly motionless, dismissible, until it sounded again, distinctly behind him, like an unseen companion adjusting its stance. He whirled, the flashlight's beam slicing frantically through the darkness. Empty. Only Elias, bathed in cold sweat despite the chill air, his stomach a knot, his breath catching shallowly in his throat. He scanned the floorboards, hunting for a loose culprit, stepping experimentally. Sometimes a creak, sometimes silence. No logic, no pattern. Yet the conviction lingered, palpable. He was not alone. Leaning on the rail, he stared into the ink-dark yard. A rustling in the undergrowth, just beyond the flashlight's reach. Eventually, retreating inside, he secured the lock, the click echoing too loudly. The ensuing days were a deliberate immersion in the mundane, unpacking cartons, arranging furniture, carving out routine. Daylight rendered the house benign. He even braved the balcony several times without incident. The wood groaned predictably underfoot. No phantom echo followed. He almost persuaded himself it had been imagination, a trick of tired nerves. Then, a week hence, under the stark illumination of a full moon, he stepped out once more. Not to linger, merely to fasten loose shutters, perhaps steal a glance at the lunar glow. The instant his foot met the first board, it protested. Immediately, a second, distinct creak answered from behind. His pulse leaped. He froze. Moonlight bleached the balcony, rendering every detail sharp, spectral. The rail, the door, the vacant space. His gaze snagged on a corner where the wood seemed unnaturally dark, stained. And then the whispers began, faint, sibilant, like 2 or 3 voices murmuring conspiratorially. Indecipherable words, yet carrying an unnerving intimacy. He felt like an intruder on a secret conclave. Breath held captive in his chest, he listened. The susurrus faded, then swelled again. The fine hairs on his arms lifted, his mouth turned to dust. He kept the balcony door nudged open with his foot, a lifeline. A primal urge screamed retreat, yet paralysis held him fast. It felt as though something stood shoulder to shoulder with him, sharing his vigil over the darkened yard. His own shoulder tightened reflexively, anticipating a touch that never came. After perhaps 10 eternal seconds, the whispers ceased. Elias drew a ragged breath and backed slowly, deliberately into the house. The door slammed shut. The lock snicked home. His legs trembled violently. Collapsing onto the living room sofa, he wrestled with the experience. Old houses groan, he told himself. Wind carries sounds. Rationalizations felt thin, threadbare against the certainty chilling his core. He switched on the television, seeking refuge in artificial noise, and remained awake for hours, his gaze returning compulsively to the back door. For several nights, the balcony remained forbidden territory. Curtains drawn, that side of the house shunned after twilight. But curiosity, insidious and persistent, gnawed at him. He craved understanding. On the 4th night of this self-imposed exile, he resolved to test the phenomenon again. He chose 2 a.m. when the world outside was utterly still, promising clarity. Reaching the balcony door, hand hovering over the knob, he hesitated. Palms slick with sweat, heart a heavy drum against his ribs. He opened it, stepped out. The wood groaned. Instantly, the second groan followed, slightly offbeat, unnervingly close. Someone pacing just behind him. He spun, fast, nothing but air and shadow. He fumbled for the flashlight clipped to his belt, sweeping its beam across the floor, probing every corner. Empty. Swallowing hard, he advanced a few paces. A board squeaked ahead. The echo followed suit. His skin crawled. A faint odor touched the air. Old timber, damp earth, decay. Then a soft clink. Glass touching wood, it sounded like, from the balcony's far end. He aimed the flashlight. Only the rails and a small bare table he hadn't yet moved. No glass, nothing. The sound repeated, delicate, distinct. Breath hitched in his throat. His grip tightened on the flashlight. Sweat traced a path down his temple. In the ensuing silence, a brief, muffled shuffling, like two pairs of feet maneuvering cautiously around each other. His eyes darted wildly, finding no source. Tension coiled in his neck and shoulders, turning them rigid, aching. Silence fell again, absolute save for the rasp of his own breathing. Before comprehension could dawn, the whispers returned, seeming to emanate from the very air beside his ear. Shock sent the flashlight tumbling from his grasp. It clattered onto the boards, rolling away. The whispers dissolved into a low, resonant hum. A subtle current of air stirred around him, though the night was utterly still. Stress brought tears stinging to his eyes. He gripped the railing, knuckles white, staring blindly into the black expanse of the yard, waiting for something. Thoughts raced, conjuring silhouettes from shadows, straining to see forms in the moonlight. But the yard remained stubbornly empty, the only motion the gentle sway of distant trees. After a minute or two that felt like an age, he slowly stooped, fumbling for the flashlight. His hands shook so badly he could barely grasp it. He clicked it off. Its light felt useless now, intrusive. Escape was the only imperative. He scrambled back inside, slammed the door, double-checked the lock. His breathing came in ragged gasps. His shirt clung damply to his back. Sleep was a forgotten country that night. Mornings always brought absolution. The balcony reverted to mere wood and air. Planks felt solid, dependable. The air smelled clean, sun-warmed. He'd test it sometimes, pacing deliberately. Nothing. No phantom footsteps, no spectral conversations. Just an ordinary structure of timber and nails. But when dusk bled across the sky, it underwent a chilling metamorphosis. It felt occupied, or perhaps possessed. The distinction blurred in the darkness. He began searching for explanations, delving into the house's meager paperwork. Maintenance logs, roofing receipts, a previous owner's note about the balcony needing eventual replacement. Nothing hinted at spectral tenants or inexplicable acoustics. He peered beneath the structure. Support beams, cobwebs, nothing structurally anomalous enough to explain the sonic illusions. Night after night, whenever he dared step outside, the second footfalls returned. Sometimes distinct, sometimes a mere supplementary creak, a soft shuffle just beyond hearing's edge. Moonlit nights remained the most potent. That's when the whispers manifested, low and urgent, like secrets exchanged in the dark. They burrowed under his skin. He could never discern words, only the unsettling tone, intimate, intense, as if plans were being laid, judgments passed. The constant tension frayed his nerves. Daytime sounds, A settling floorboard inside a creaking door now triggered a jolt of adrenaline, an expectation of the other. One evening, he attempted a different strategy. He placed a chair on the balcony before sunset, intending to sit through the transition, to observe the change firsthand. Around 6, as the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows, the air cooled. He sat, sipping water, watching the light fade. For a while, mundane quiet reigned. But as true darkness gathered, the familiar tension crept back. The wood beneath the chair legs groaned once. A heartbeat later, its echo sounded. Elias's hands clamped onto the chair arms. His pulse quickened. A breeze whispered through the branches overhead. The atmosphere grew heavy, charged. He waited, scarcely breathing, straining for footsteps, for whispers. Goose flesh prickled his arms against the deepening chill. An hour past sunset, the first whisper drifted by, soft, distant, yet undeniably present on the empty balcony. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the planks. Instantly, a second scrape answered, perfectly mimicking his own movement. His stomach lurched. He reached for the door but hesitated, compelled by a morbid curiosity. "Hello?" he called out, his voice thin, unsteady. He hated the tremor of fear in it. The whispering ceased. Then, behind him, the boards creaked. 1 step, 2. A distinct warmth bloomed on the back of his neck, the intimate proximity of another person standing inches away. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. He spun around. Empty space, wooden railing, deepening night. Turning back, he saw the door handle rattle. A single, sharp movement, then stillness. He froze, mind wiped clean save for one imperative. Inside. He stumbled to the door, wrenched it open, slipped through, locked it, yanked the heavy curtains closed. He collapsed onto the sofa, the phantom sensation of presence still clinging to him, a cold weight on his shoulders. His neck and back throbbed with tension. Now, Elias avoids the balcony after dusk. The curtains remain drawn once the sun relinquishes the sky. Every lamp in the house burns bright against the encroaching dark. He seeks distraction in books, in screens. Some nights, he still hears it. The slow creak of footsteps pacing out there, though he is safely inside. Once, the low murmuring persisted for nearly half an hour. He sat rigid in the living room, staring at the door, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, until silence finally fell. He hasn't tried to record it, hasn't sought proof. There's a part of him terrified of confirming its stark reality. He cycles through explanations, structural quirks, acoustic anomalies, sounds carried on the wind from unseen neighbors. Logic offers flimsy comfort in the deep hours of the night, when the echo steps sound again, when that undeniable presence settles beside him. His chest constricts, and his only prayer is for the dawn. He tells himself he'll understand eventually, but deep down, doubt festers. All Elias knows for certain is that when night descends, the balcony ceases to be just wood and nails. It becomes something else, something watchful and waiting, and he cannot, will not, stand out there alone to meet it. Eight months passed. The echo and marble halls of the City Art Museum became my nocturnal dominion. A means to bolster meager finances, this night watchman role gifted me days bathed in sunlight, swapping them for the profound quietude of sequestered masterpieces. Peace resided there, a palpable entity dwelling amidst the shrouded sculptures and slumbering canvases. Until a month ago, the most pressing concerns involved the petulant whine of a faulty alarm or a forgotten key twisting uselessly in a supply closet lock. Nothing spectral, nothing to prickle the skin or quicken the pulse. Then, one solitary portrait ruptured the calm, initiating a fixation that now coils viper-like in my gut whenever memory serves the first unsettling glimpse. I am Leo, not prone to flights of fancy nor startled by fleeting shadows. My equilibrium is hard won. Yet what unfolded beneath the low gallery lights sent an icy current across my scalp, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the cage of my ribs. Let me trace the genesis of this aberration. My rounds were routine, a familiar circuit. The principal gallery occupies the second floor, a nexus from which smaller chambers radiate like petals. One such room houses a quartet of portraits, one canvas per wall, all born from the same brush. Largely overlooked, eclipsed by the renowned works dominating the main concourse, they depict figures swathed in antiquated attire, their expressions ranging from vacant ennui to stoic indifference. My gaze rarely lingered, but that particular night, an unseen current snagged my attention, pulling it toward the portrait nestled in the deepest corner. A gentleman, austere of countenance, possessed of obsidian eyes. His dark coat absorbed the ambient light. One hand rested, proprietorial, upon a diminutive table. The brass plaque beneath, consulted once out of idle curiosity, dated the work to the late 19th century, the artist's name failing to imprint itself upon my mind. It was the figure's orientation that first arrested me. A subtle discordance struck me. The man's posture, his very alignment within the gilded frame, felt skewed. His torso canted slightly more than recollection allowed, as if leaning into an unheard confidence. Perhaps, I reasoned, it was a trick of perception, a phantom conjured by replaced bulbs cast in novel shadows, or maybe my memory conflated this image with another. I dismissed it with a mental shrug. Closer inspection yielded no definitive alteration. The subject remained centrally composed, yet the sense of displacement persisted, a faint dissonance. No alarm bells sounded then, only a flicker of bemused curiosity. I moved on, attributing the anomaly to fatigue, the mind's propensity for invention in the small hours. The following night, around the stroke of midnight, I bypassed my usual methodical sweep, drawn inexorably back to that specific chamber. Normally, I'd complete 2 full gallery inspections before retreating to my station near the grand entrance. This time, the portrait commanded my immediate presence. I stood before it, the silence amplifying my own breath. Indeed, the man appeared to have edged his left shoulder perceptibly nearer the frame's boundary. Impossible, my rational mind insisted. Pigment doesn't migrate across canvas. Nevertheless, my pulse accelerated, a frantic bird trapped within my chest. My phone emerged, its lens capturing the scene. Swiftly, I navigated to the museum's online collection, locating the official photograph. It depicted the gentleman facing squarely forward. No lean, no tilt. My own captured image mirrored this official version precisely. A glacial chill traced my forearms. I knew. I had witnessed the shift mere moments before, yet the digital evidence refuted my senses. The photograph, it seemed, did not lie. Or did it? Exiting the room, I attempted to dispel the clinging unease. Within the sterile glow of the security office, camera feeds displayed innocuous stillness. Weariness, I concluded, must be the culprit, my eyes fabricating subtleties born of exhaustion. The perceived difference was marginal, surely imaginary. Yet, as my shift concluded and I walked toward the dawn, the image lingered, a persistent burr. By the time I reached home, logic warred with instinct. I was half convinced of my own delusion, but the knot in my stomach remained stubbornly real. Night after subsequent night, that room exerted its pull. Each approach tightened a screw of apprehension within me. This wasn't the jolt of sudden fright, but a gradual titration of dread seeping into the marrow. I would enter, confront the canvas, and swear. Swear. The figure had incrementally advanced toward the right verge. Sometimes his head seemed minutely turned. Other times, the focus of his dark eyes felt altered. One evening, his hand appeared positioned higher upon the table's polished surface. Yet, invariably, photographic documentation revealed only the static, original composition. The forward-facing man, his expression neutral, his hand resting placidly. For several nights, I guarded this secret instability. Voicing it risked ridicule, the quiet judgment of colleagues who might deem me unraveling. Eventually, however, the pressure demanded release. I confided in Finn, the guard who relieved me each morning. He chuckled, attributing my perception to sheer boredom. During a brief overlap one afternoon, he accompanied me, scrutinized the portrait, and pronounced it utterly unremarkable. "Maybe you're just staring too hard, Leo," he offered, clapping my shoulder with easy dismissal. I tried to heed his counsel to let the matter rest, but the painting held me captive. The simple act of turning the doorknob to that small gallery began to constrict my throat. Driven by a need for empirical proof, one night I initiated a new strategy. My phone, set to record video, was positioned discreetly on a nearby pedestal. For 10 agonizing minutes, I stood sentinel, arms crossed, gaze locked on the portrait, willing it to betray itself. Nothing. No flicker, no infinitesimal slide, just static paint on canvas. Reviewing the footage yielded only frustration. 10 minutes of absolute immobility. My mind felt like a tangled wire. Certainty warred with the utter lack of evidence. My unease intensified with each pass. A small, sharp jolt of adrenaline accompanied every encounter. Heat bloomed on my face, my fingers instinctively curled into fists. Perspiration beaded more readily now, dampening the collar of my uniform. I began to dread that particular room, yet avoidance felt impossible. An obsessive compulsion drove me back, demanding I either confirm the phenomenon or concede my sanity's erosion. My stomach churned with anticipatory nausea whenever my route curved toward that cursed portrait. Roughly 2 weeks into this silent ordeal, the figure's migration became undeniable, at least to my eyes. He was practically abutting the frame's right edge. The man's shoulder nearly kissed the gilded border. The table beneath his hand tilted at an unnatural angle. His hand seemed poised closer to the lacquered wood's precipice. At this juncture, I sought external validation. I petitioned Ms. Eleanor Vance, the museum's curator, to examine the painting during daylight hours. Preoccupied, she acquiesced only after persistent urging. I watched, heart thudding, as she studied the portrait, consulted the plaque, and declared everything perfectly normal. When I indicated the pronounced lean of the torso, she merely shrugged, asserting it was the painting's inherent composition. Had there ever been older photographs? She led me to the hushed archives where dusty catalogs yielded an image from 3 decades prior. Black and white, it mirrored the online version. The man centered, subtly turned, but lacking the dramatic cant I perceive nightly. Miss Vance saw no discrepancy. Staring at the monochrome print, the fine hairs on my nape prickled. I knew. It differed from the current nocturnal presentation, yet her placid certainty was unshakable. That night, my nerves were stretched tauter than ever before. Entering the chamber around 11:30, I placed my flashlight on a bench, its beam illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stillness, and simply stared. The longer I looked, the more convinced I became. The painted man was now leaning so profoundly askew he appeared poised to step out of the canvas. No brushstroke seemed disturbed, yet the entire form had shifted, warped. My breathing grew shallow, ragged. A tremor took root in my legs. Swallowing felt like forcing down sand. Wiping sweat from my brow, I retrieved my phone once more. Another snapshot. Immediate review. The standard composition stared back, mocking me with its placid normalcy. A surge of impotent fury made me want to hurl the device against the far wall, but I contained the impulse, pocketing the phone with trembling hands. For an hour I remained, pacing the confines of the small room, eyes fixed on the portrait. Perhaps sustained observation would reveal the moment of transition, but nothing stirred under my vigil. A headache began to pulse behind my temples, born of clenched jaws and frayed nerves. Reluctantly, I resumed my rounds, but the painting drew me back repeatedly. With each return, the figure seemed infinitesimally closer to the edge. By 3 a.m, his forward foot seemed almost obscured by the frame's lower lip. His face was undeniably turned further rightward. The corner of one dark eye seemed to fix upon me directly. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat audible in my ears. My arms felt weak, unsteady. I rubbed my damp palms against my trousers again and again. The urge to call someone, anyone, was overwhelming. But what could I possibly articulate? The next morning, I appealed to Finn again, my voice strained. I confessed the depth of my fear, the sleeplessness, the desperate need for corroboration. He agreed, perhaps sensing the genuine distress beneath my previous claims, to arrive early for his shift. Near midnight, he joined me. We proceeded to the room. "Look closely, Finn," I urged, my voice tight. He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the canvas. "Okay," he said calmly. "I see him, man in a black coat, table beside him, right in the middle. No tilt, no shift, nothing amiss." A wave of cold panic washed over me. Why couldn't he perceive it? I pressed him for details, a precise description. He recounted the exact composition depicted in the official photographs, the image utterly incongruous with the skewed figure dominating my vision. Sweat trickled down my spine, my skin crawled. I tried pointing, tracing the perceived edges within the frame, but he just shook his head, suggesting gently that perhaps I needed a break, some genuine rest. 2 days later, a different tactic. Small, precisely placed strips of archival tape affixed to the wall, bracketing the painting's frame, serving as reference points. If the figure moved, surely its relationship to these markers would alter. Yet the following morning revealed the tape undisturbed. the painting itself showing no physical displacement. I meticulously examined the canvas edges, the hanging wires. Everything was secure, physically static. My eyes, however, continued to insist on movement. Sleep offered little refuge now, even during daylight hours. Lying in bed, the image of the painted man would superimpose itself on the darkness behind my eyelids. Leaning, always leaning, closer to freedom, his obsidian eyes fixed on mine. A persistent weight settled in my chest. Tension became my constant companion. Mundane sounds made me jump. My patience frayed thin. The prospect of work filled me with a nauseating blend of dread and morbid fascination. I needed the income, yes, but some perverse part of me also needed to witness the painting's ultimate destination. Perhaps I clung to the hope it was an elaborate optical illusion, some masterstroke of technique revealing itself only under specific nocturnal conditions. But the solitude of my perception remained inexplicable. Then, about a week ago, the culmination. I walked into the gallery and froze. The man was almost halfway out. He wasn't merely leaning. He appeared to be actively climbing, one hand planted firmly on the physical substance of the gilded frame itself, seemingly gripping it for leverage. My stomach plummeted. My heart seized, its violent thumping blurring my vision. Cold sweat slicked my temples. Trembling, I reached out, my fingers hovering over the canvas. Smooth, flat paint met my touch. I traced the area where his hand appeared to grasp the frame. Nothing but aged pigment and varnish. My eyes screamed, escape, but my fingertips reported only impassive canvas. I snatched my hand back as if burned, wiping my palm compulsively on my trousers. Heart pounding like a war drum, I retreated into the corridor, gasping for breath. Enough. I called Mr. Kendrick, the head of security, on the internal line, citing sudden illness. Clocking out early, I fled the museum's oppressive silence. That was last week. Vacation days provided a necessary buffer, time spent sequestered at home, attempting to soothe my shredded nerves. A visit to my physician yielded a clean bill of physical health, though my blood pressure registered high. Stress, undoubtedly. I omitted any mention of the portrait. The label of hallucination was one I desperately wished to avoid. Yet, even within the familiar confines of my apartment, unease lingered, the painting's phantom migration replaying in my mind's eye. Yesterday, necessity drove me back. The paycheck beckoned. I entered the museum around 10, an hour before my shift commenced. The familiar grandeur felt tainted, alien. Perspiration prickled my skin despite the cool air. My feet carried me, against my better judgment, directly to that gallery. Stepping inside, my gaze locked onto the corner portrait. He was back, centered, facing forward, hand resting innocuously on the table. The lean, the impossible climb, vanished. I stood, rooted, for a long minute, breath catching in my throat. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me, immediately followed by profound confusion. I touched the frame, ran my hand along the wall. Everything appeared utterly, maddeningly normal. Was it finally over? The remainder of the night unfolded under a cloud of residual anxiety. My heart rate refused to settle into its usual placid rhythm. Periodic checks of the room revealed no change. The painting remained stubbornly, conventionally static, even to my hypervigilant eyes. Had it reached its destination while I was away, only to retreat? Or had the entire episode been a protracted, stress-induced phantasm? Yet the memory of that hand gripping the frame remains visceral, tangible, crawling under my skin even now. Every time I pass that small room now, my muscles clench involuntarily. A tightness grips my face. My palms turn damp. A compulsive glance toward the corner portrait is unavoidable, half expecting, half dreading the return of the lean. Thus far, it holds its pose. I haven't shared the full narrative with my colleagues. They know only of my stress, but my surveillance continues covertly. Should it move again, I must bear witness. Part of me craves a transfer, a different shift, sanctuary in another wing of the museum. Another, more stubborn part insists I confront this, whatever it is. Proof eludes me, yet the physiological reality of my terror, the pounding heart, the sweating palms, the strangled breath, cannot be denied. That, at least, was real. What to call it, how to rationalize it, remains beyond my grasp. All I know is that tonight I will be in that gallery again, waiting for the painting to remain still, or waiting for it to move. And deep down, I confess, I am no longer certain which outcome I truly desire. The house held secrets, but a window materialized from plaster and lath was not among those I'd anticipated. My crowbar, intent on demolishing an aging hallway wall, struck something unexpectedly smooth behind the crumbling drywall. As I cleared the debris, expecting defunct wiring or perhaps the ghost of some forgotten repair, a wooden window frame emerged from the dust. Its glass was opaque with grime. A knot tightened in my stomach. The exterior of my house, a monotonous expanse of gray siding on that side, offered no counterpart, no possibility for such an aperture. There was nothing beyond that wall, and yet here it stood, an architectural impossibility. Leaning closer, I scrubbed at the pane with my sleeve. A dim reflection stared back, then yielded to a faint internal radiance. I pressed my eye to the glass, anticipating the side of insulation, the dark cavity between studs. Instead, an intimate tableau unfolded, a chamber, small and sparsely furnished. My breath hitched. A narrow bed, draped in a simple coverlet, occupied one side. Beside it, a small table held an old lamp, its bulb inexplicably alight, casting a soft corona that barely touched the edges of the bed, and a low dresser against the opposite wall. No door was visible. No other furniture disturbed the confined space. A prickle of sweat traced a path down my neck. My fingertip met the glass. It was strangely cold. Comprehension remained elusive. Retreating, I snatched a flashlight and circled the house's perimeter, beam cutting through the evening gloom. The spot, corresponding to the interior anomaly, remained stubbornly flat, a seamless stretch of siding devoid of any bulge or seam. Back inside, I consulted the brittle blueprints rescued from a dusty drawer. They depicted only the familiar hallway configuration, offering no hint of an adjunct room, no deviation from the expected. A low thrumming started in my head, a sensation like fraying nerves. The window was impossible, yet undeniably present. Sleep offered no refuge that night, haunted as it was by the lamplit stillness of the hidden room. Images flickered behind my closed eyes, the lamp casting elongated shadows, the texture of the unseen walls. A yearning grew, to tap the glass, to trace the frame for a hidden latch, to somehow breach the barrier. Curiosity warred with a deep-seated disquiet. Finding a furnished, lit room buried within a wall felt profoundly wrong. Dawn found me back at the anomaly, drawn by a compulsion stronger than fear. With careful taps of a hammer, I exposed the entire frame, wary of shattering the glass. My fingers explored the aged wood, searching for hinges, locks, any sign of function on my side. Solid, immovable, the glass felt thick, resilient. Peering behind the frame revealed nothing but solid wall structure. It wasn't merely decorative. Through the pane, the lamp's soft glow persisted. A cold, sinking sensation settled in my gut. On impulse, I knocked, my knuckles rapping sharply against the surface. The lamp flickered. Once, then resumed its steady illumination. Nothing else stirred. Days dissolved into a meticulous, futile cartography of my own home. Closets were emptied, their back walls probed. The attic yielded only dust and insulation, no concealed hatchways or forgotten passages. Yet the hidden chamber remained inviolate, sealed behind its impossible pane. During daylight hours, I would stand sentinel, gazing through the glass, hunting for clues. The bed remained neatly made. The lamp presided over its worn table. A scattering of papers lay undisturbed on the dresser. An aura of disuse clung to everything, a fine layer of dust, yet the lamp never extinguished. How it drew power, disconnected from any known circuit, remained a gnawing puzzle. The thought of drilling through the exterior wall surfaced, only to be quashed by an inexplicable inner warning, a visceral lurch in my stomach. One evening, performing a final check before retreating to bed, I leaned close. The hallway lights cast my reflection onto the glass, mingling with the dim interior. The lamp shone faithfully. Then, a flicker of motion near the far wall, coalescing into a definite form, something indistinct by the dresser. A trick of the light, perhaps? My own distorted reflection? I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, straining to see. It resolved into a shape, humanoid, standing near the foot of the bed, seemingly stooped over it. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs, my muscles tensed, breath catching shallowly in my throat. The figure adjusted something on the bed, then slowly, deliberately turned towards the window. I recoiled as if struck. A jolt, electric and cold, shot up my spine. The fine hairs on my arms bristled. Reflection? No, the angle was wrong, the posture alien. The figure's head was cocked slightly, its gaze seemingly fixed upon me. Hello? The word emerged as a shaky whisper. Silence answered. It simply stood there, an attitude of quiet scrutiny radiating from its stillness. Adrenaline surged, a frantic urge to flee warring with a paralyzing need to understand. I noticed its eyes, or where eyes should be, held a faint sheen, a dull mirroring of light. A wave of nausea washed over me. They seemed disturbingly like my own, yet somehow inverted. The face remained shrouded in shadow, a silhouette limned by the lamp's glow. Neither tall nor short, its build felt disturbingly familiar. I backed away slowly. The figure remained motionless, watching. Daylight brought denial, a desperate attempt to reclassify terror as fatigue-induced phantasm. Through the glass, the room appeared serene, empty. Bed, lamp, dresser, all static, undisturbed. No trace of an occupant. Another knock yielded only silence. I forced myself through the motions of the day, errands becoming a shield against the mounting dread. though the memory of the figure ambushed me at intervals, twisting my insides. That night, cloaked in shadow, I commenced my vigil from a chair dragged into the hallway. I extinguished all lights save for a dim bulb at the far end, minimizing reflections. Arms folded tight, foot tapping a nervous rhythm, I listened to the house settle. The wind worrying a loose gutter, the refrigerator's low hum. An hour crawled by. Restlessness gnawed at me, my eyelids grew heavy. Then, movement within the room, the same shape materializing near the bed's edge. The lamp pulsed once. A jolt ran through me, my legs twitching involuntarily. Gripping the chair's arms, I rose with painstaking slowness. Closer I crept, drawn towards the glass. The figure bent, gathering the scattered papers from the coverlet. It straightened, pivoted, and the full weight of its attention fell upon me. My pulse thudded, a heavy beat against my eardrums. It lifted a hand, a gesture ambiguous, almost a wave. I stared, throat constricting. My own hand rose, trembling, the head tilted again, that uncanny pose. My gaze locked onto those eyes, twin pools of unsettling reflectivity, seeming to hold my own distorted face within their depths. Without conscious thought, I formed the words silently, breath fogging the pain. "Who are you?" The figure pressed its palm flat in the air above the bed, then let the papers flutter back onto the comforter. It took a step closer, positioning itself near the dresser. Details remained elusive. Short hair, a build mirroring my own, but the face stayed obscured. My heart hammered violently, aching against my ribs. Panic erupted, sudden and overwhelming. I stumbled backward, feet catching on the uneven floor where boards had been removed. Catching myself, I risked a glance back. The figure stood rigidly beside the bed, still watching. A prickling crawled across the nape of my neck, the sensation of being observed by something utterly alien. I fled to my bedroom, slamming the door, twisting the lock. My heart galloped, my palms were slick with sweat. Coherent thought fragmented. Sleep was impossible, besieged by the image of those reflective eyes boring into mine. For days, the hallway became forbidden territory. I threw myself into other renovations, painting distant walls, wrestling with recalcitrant light fixtures, anything to avoid that section of the house. Yet, passing the threshold, even averted, sent a chill skittering across my skin. My thoughts inevitably circled back. The impossible room, the constant lamp, the silent figure, those eyes. Eventually, courage, or perhaps compulsion, drove me back. Hallway light blazing, I stood before the window once more. The room beyond seemed unchanged. The soft glow, the smooth bed, the scattered papers, no figure initially. Bracing my hands on the sill, I leaned in, searching for normalcy. The lamp flickered. Anxiety spiked, sharp and cold. I held my breath, waiting. The silhouette reappeared, this time by the dresser, one hand sliding the papers about as if searching. I had to speak. "I don't know what you want," I forced out, voice steadier than I felt. "I don't know how you got in there." My jaw ached from clenching. The figure offered no reply, continuing its shuffling ministrations. Then the head turned. Those eyes found mine. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, my mouth turned to dust. Lips parted, but no sound came. Abruptly, it stooped, retrieved a single sheet, presenting it outward towards the glass, as if for my inspection. From my vantage, reading it was impossible. My gaze darted frantically across the pane, seeking any clue. The figure then folded the paper deliberately and slipped it inside the bed's pillowcase. My scalp tingled. The action felt weighted, significant, a message just beyond my grasp. The lamp flickered again. In the instant of darkness, the figure vanished. Light restored. The room was empty. I stood, panting, palms pressed flat against the cool wall, sweat plastering my shirt to my back. The air felt thick, charged. My breathing came in ragged gasps, pulse echoing in my ears. Who could I call? The absurdity struck me. An electrician for a phantom room? A paranormal hotline? Logic offered no purchase here, leaving me adrift in helpless frustration. The following nights were spent resisting the window's pull, though curiosity gnawed relentlessly. Focus fractured. I needed ingress, a solution. Walls and floors were tapped anew, listening for hollowness. Measurements were taken, external versus internal. A discrepancy emerged. Nearly 7 feet of interior space unaccounted for, a volume that simply did not exist on the outside. The tape measure trembled in my hands. The math mocked me. Trapped in a wakened nightmare, grounded by chillingly real details. One night, resolved to capture proof, I set my phone on a stool, lens aimed at the window, recording function active. I sat beside it, a silent sentinel in the dim hallway. The house murmured around me. My thoughts drifted, lost work hours, the escalating anxiety, the sanity of seeking professional help. Then, the familiar flicker from the room beyond. My chest tightened. Leaning forward, eyes fixed on the glass, I watched the silhouette manifest near the bed's foot, sifting through the papers again. My own breathing quickened, audible in the quiet. The phone recorded. I remained silent, needing objective verification. Slowly, the figure turned. A wave of primal fear washed over me. I clenched my fists, nails biting into palms, refusing to look away. It drifted closer to the window, stopping several feet short. Again, the bizarre reflectivity in its eyes like gazing into murky pools. The urge to snatch the phone and run screamed within me, but I held my ground. Then, with the soft pulse of the lamp, it was gone. My heart raced long after. Retrieving the phone, hands shaken, I reviewed the footage. The screen showed the hallway, my own tense form. The lamp in the other room flickered. For a fleeting moment, a darker shape seemed superimposed on the glass. Faint, ephemeral, more shadow than substance. Then the lamp steadied, the anomaly gone. It wasn't what I'd seen. The recording offered no validation, only ambiguity, like a technological glitch. Frustration prickled across my skin. Proof remained elusive. Smashing the window, the thought arose, visceral and tempting. A sledgehammer, a decisive breach, yet a profound instinctual certainty held me back. A gut feeling that violating that barrier would unleash something far worse. Fear of the unknown occupant, or fear of what crossing the threshold might reveal about myself. The thought alone made my palms sweat. This past week, I've attempted normalcy. Renovations proceed haltingly. The silhouette still appears, sometimes every night, sometimes less often, rummaging through papers, standing motionless by the dresser, occasionally lingering beside the bed, facing the window. Each time it senses my presence, the head tilts and my heart constricts. Those eyes, always seeming to reflect my own gaze back at me. A conviction I can't prove, but feel in my bones. Sleep is a landscape dominated by that quiet room. I wake sweat-soaked, drained before the day begins. Yet, I cannot disengage. I check the hallway compulsively, hoping for emptiness, for a return to reason. The window persists, a portal to the illogical. Last night, I taped a note to the glass. "Who are you?" Written large and clear. Hours later, it lay on the hallway floor. The tape was intact but curled upon itself. Coincidence or something else? The ambiguity unnerves me. Logical avenues are exhausted. House records, dating back 40 years, show only mundane alterations, no sealed wings or hidden annexes. I am stranded between the rational world and this impossible intrusion. A window looks into a furnished, lit room that doesn't exist, occupied by a silent figure I cannot reach. Selling the house feels like desertion, abandoning a puzzle uniquely mine. What would another owner see? Would the phenomenon cease with my departure? The questions spin endlessly, fueling the insomnia. For now, I continue the charade of renovation, skirting the hallway when possible. But the window's presence is palpable, a cold spot in the house's energy field. Gooseflesh rises when I pass. Moments of desperate courage surface, urging me to break the glass, step through. They never last. I don't know which terrifies me more, what resides within that room, or what discovering its true nature might mean for me. I cling to the eroding shores of calm, but this truth remains. Every glance through that pane, every time those reflective eyes meet mine, a chill penetrates to my very marrow. It feels like staring into an unrecognized facet of myself, a prospect more frightening than any ghost. No mere experiment with ether and wire should have burrowed so deep beneath the skin. Yet this one did. I'd cultivated my little patch of the airwaves for years, a homemade studio tucked away, my broadcasts mostly self-indulgent rambles for a scant few sympathetic ears. Ghostly whispers of interference, inexplicable pops in the dead of night. These were familiar hazards of the hobby, impersonal artifacts of the atmosphere, until the voice. It surfaced from the lowest frequencies near the third hour past midnight, when the world outside was utterly still. It breathed my name. Elias. It whispered the number and the street where childhood memories lay buried, decaying things I hadn't exhumed in years. The cadence was slow, attenuated, as if stretched across an impossible distance, yet intimate as a breath on the ear. From that moment, the console, once a sanctuary, radiated a chilling premonition. Elias, 35, orbits around the sun. Days spent navigating the sterile currents of a downtown office. Nights charting the invisible streams of radio waves. This nocturnal voyage was my own, conducted from the sanctum of a spare room, its walls softened by foam panels, the air smelling faintly of dust and ozone. Before me sat a cobbled-together console, second-hand microphones, patiently sourced components, a transmitter coaxed into life by my own hands. No professional, me, just an adept amateur seeking the solace of the signal, the challenge of connection across the void. My transmissions, music, musings on local happenings, were offerings to the emptiness, never venturing into forbidden spectrums, a ritual of relaxation, unpaid and unassuming. But some 3 weeks passed, a restless curiosity spurred me toward the shadowed basement of the spectrum, those frequencies less traveled, hoping perhaps for cryptic long-distance murmurs or some hidden electronic ghost. A vigil, fueled by black coffee, was planned, stretching towards the dawn. Clad in the soft armor of old sweats, I settled into the protesting squeak of my chair, cocooned in headphones, and began the slow sweep downwards. For a long while, only the familiar texture of the void answered. Skeins of static, the fleeting phantoms of music, fractured syllables lost in transit. Then, my attention snagged on a steady, low susurrus, a persistent hiss like an indrawn breath across leagues of emptiness. It seemed constant, a dead channel, yet I lingered, listening. And it changed. The hiss attenuated, thinned, and from its heart, a single word coalesced, sharpened into terrifying clarity. Elias. A tremor seized my limbs. A phantom echo, my own sleep-deprived mind playing tricks. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence. A cold dew slicked my brow. I tore the cans from my ears, the abrupt quiet of the room almost deafening. My pulse throbbed, a heavy beat against my eardrums. The console lights blinked, impassive. Slowly, dreadfully, I replaced the headphones. Elias, it came again, unmistakable. Then the impossible. Coordinates from a life left behind decades ago, the street where boyhood ended. A chill, sharp and invasive, traced its way up my spine. My throat constricted, mouth instantly dry. My eyes darted into the empty corners of the room, seeking a corporeal source where none could exist. Scrabbling at the dial, a desperate flight across the bands. The voice dissolved into a blizzard of noise, a momentary reprieve. Relief, fragile as frost on glass. I risked a breath. Then, piercing the static veil, insistent now, more urgent, Elias. I slammed the power switch. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. My fingers trembled against the cool metal of the console. Stumbling to the kitchen, the overhead light felt harsh, accusatory. Water, cold against a parched throat. A prank? Some elaborate, cruel jest hatched by a neighbor skilled in illicit transmissions? The mind grasped for such straws, anything to fend off the tide of the impossible. Sleep refused its sanctuary that night. The voice echoed in the cranial dark, flat, affectless, yet seeming to traverse immense gulfs. Each remembered syllable was a tightening knot in my chest. That address, a ghost unearthed from a past I rarely spoke of, even to myself. Who could know? Dawn found me frayed, unrested, adrift in a sea of fatigue. A dull ache resided behind the eyes. A weariness seeped into bone. The daylight world felt thin, unreal. Office routines blurred, the screen's glow failing to hold my focus. The phantom broadcast replayed endlessly in my mind. The strange hiss preceding it, the unnerving intimacy of its knowledge. A colleague's casual query about my pallor was met with a vague deflection, a mumbled excuse about a rough night. How to articulate the unutterable fear that had taken root? That evening, the threshold to the studio felt charged, repellent. The familiar foam panels seemed to absorb the light differently. The dials on the console gleamed with latent menace. My coffee mug from the vigil sat accusingly, half full and cold. I resolved to reclaim normalcy, to perform a simple broadcast on the standard bands, traffic updates, a note about the hardware store sale. Clearing my throat, I spoke into the microphone, but my voice caught, betraying the tension coiled within me. A palpable tightness gripped the air as I pushed through the local minutia, the words tasting like ash. The broadcast lasted perhaps 30 minutes. Mike silenced. Then a surge, a tidal wave of static crashing in the cans louder than before. My pulse leaped. I froze, rooted to the spot. Beneath the roar, an undertone, a resonant hum, like distant machinery or a vast alien throat clearing. I yanked the headphones clear, but the sound persisted. A phantom vibration seeming to emanate from the room itself, faint but undeniable. Indistinct murmurs were woven within it, tantalizingly close to words. Frantic dial twisting commenced, a desperate search for clean air. The static shifted texture, pitch, frequency, but the hum clung tenacious, pursuing me across the spectrum. I fled the room, sealing the door behind me like a tomb lid. Standing in the hallway, hands scrubbing at my face, a tremor ran through my limbs. My mouth held the metallic tang of fear. Sleep offered no escape, only a different haunting. I woke near the witching hour, slick with sweat, heart pounding. Dream-logged, a corridor swathed in absolute black. An entity coalesced from visual noise, a man-shaped void of churning static, swirling specks of black and white. Each flicker, each shift of its unstable form was accompanied by a sibilant hiss that scraped against the inner ear. Faceless, yet its attention was a palpable weight, pinning me with dread, rendering me immobile. A hand, sketched in interference, ephemeral fingers outlined in crackling light, extended towards me. The head inclined. The roiling chaos of its face began to resolve, mirroring my own features with horrifying fidelity. Then it spoke, using my voice, reciting the mundane broadcast from hours before, word for hollow word, stripping it of all meaning, leaving only cold mimicry. I snatched back to wakefulness, lungs burning for air. The sheets clung, cold and damp. My hands were unsteady, breath tearing through me in quick, shallow bursts. Fumbling for the lamp, I banished the shadows but not the visceral terror. My heart hammered, a runaway drum against my ribs. The phone screen offered a cold blue anchor in the dark. I scrolled mindlessly, seeking distraction. Fitful doze claimed me near dawn, only to be ripped away by the insistent morning alarm. The subsequent days bled into a gray continuum of apprehension. I clung to the familiar frequencies, the safer harbors of the airwaves, abandoning the lower depths entirely. Yet the hum sometimes persisted, an insidious undertone beneath routine transmissions. Sometimes a fleeting whisper would snake through the noise. My name, a shard of forgotten adolescence, a half-remembered fear. Elusive as smoke, it vanished the instant I tried to pin it down with recording software, as if aware, playing a cruel game. My gut twisted into knots whenever the power switch clicked on. Driven by a desperate need for a rational explanation, I undertook a meticulous dissection of the apparatus. Cables were renewed, grounding wires verified, the antenna connection outside scrutinized under the unforgiving daylight. Nothing. No flaw, no breach, no earthly point of ingress. Reassembled, tested, and the moment I cautiously dipped into the lower bands, the static surged, birthing the voice anew, soft, almost conversational. "Elias, you cannot hide." Ice flooded my veins. Breath hitched, trapped in my tightening chest. A frantic shutdown, a stumble away from the console. I fled to the neutral territory of the living room, sinking onto the couch, seeking solace in the mundane flicker of the television, volume low. But the voice resonated, inescapable. This wasn't random interference. It was intimate, targeted, invasive. It possessed knowledge sealed within the vaults of my memory, secrets I'd never uttered aloud. Sleep brought the static phantom back, terrifyingly close this time. The dreamscape shifted perspective. I observed myself seated at the radio console, hunched, oblivious. The figure stood directly behind me, a hand composed of crackling void resting lightly on my shoulder. Its interference bled onto my dream self, static creeping like frost around my face, merging with my hair. Its face warped again, solidifying into my own terrified expression looking back at me. I woke with a strangled cry, heart battering my ribs as if I'd run miles. Drenched, skin crawling with goose flesh, I sat shivering on the mattress edge, the dream's violation lingering like a physical touch. The studio became forbidden ground, entered only under the perceived safety of daylight, all lights blazing. I rearranged the furniture, needing the escape route of the door constantly within my sight line. A constant, prickling awareness lived at my back. My own equipment seemed hostile now, possessed. Phantom bursts of static from the inert console would freeze me mid-step, heart leaping. I considered dismantling it all, tearing out the wires that had become conduits of dread, yet a strange loyalty to my craft held me, intertwined with a deeper, colder fear. If I destroyed the receiver, would the transmission simply find another way in? If I ran, would it pursue me through other means? After 2 weeks besieged by this invisible intrusion, a desperate resolve hardened within me. To confront the unseen, to face the phantom on its own ground. A planned descent into the haunted frequencies, armed this time. Recording devices active, diagnostic software running, a logbook open to note time and frequency. A meticulous sweep was planned, inch by agonizing inch, through the spectrum's abyss. If it spoke, I would capture its spectral breath. Evidence, proof for skeptical ears, perhaps even for my own fracturing sanity. The hours crawled past midnight towards the nadir of the night, 3:00 a.m. approaching. Eyes gritty with fatigue, spine protesting the long vigil. Only the ceaseless hiss and whisper of the void answered my search. Doubt crept in, insidious. Had fevered imagination conjured it all? Was the haunting over, leaving me alone with my fear? I was poised to surrender, to switch off and seek refuge in bed. Then, the familiar shift in the noise floor. The deep water hum surged through the headphones, a rising tide from an unseen ocean. A sharp intake of breath, my stomach clenching tight. Recorder active, fingers poised. Elias. And then it divulged a truth buried so deep within me, a secret shame confessed to no living soul, barely acknowledged even to myself. A raw, visceral shock coursed through me. My throat went dry. The words, calm and precise, hung in the static-laden air, impossibly known. A pause, pregnant with menace. Then the secret, repeated verbatim, sealing its terrifying, inexplicable knowledge. Fear clamped down, absolute and paralyzing. I stared, unseeing, at the glowing dials, unable to move my hands. My muscles locked, breath coming in shallow, useless gasps. My heart pounded, a painful thudding in my chest. Then the voice posed a question, quiet, almost curious. "Why do you hide?" My own voice, when I finally forced it out past the constriction in my throat, was a ragged tremor, barely audible. "Who? Who are you?" A sharp burst of static answered, like a door slamming shut, then nothing. Silence pressed in, heavy and vast. I waited, palm slick with sweat on the console, knees threatening to buckle. The headphones hummed with benign, empty noise. The voice did not answer. I played back the recording, hope warring with dread. The faint hiss was there, a baseline of noise. My own trembling question echoed back from the digital file, thin and afraid. But the voice, the damning secret, vanished, utterly absent from the recording. It was as if it had never spoken. A surge of helpless fury rose in me, and my fist struck the table. Rage, terror, frustration churning within. It toyed with me, refusing capture, refusing proof. I yanked off the headphones, slammed down the power switches, unable to bear the contaminated space another second. Air burned in my lungs from hyperventilation. I hurried to my bedroom, locked the door, leaning against the wood, heart a wild bird against my ribs. The equipment remains, a silent monument to my transgression into forbidden realms. But the lower frequencies are now terra prohibita, zones I dare not map again. Yet, sometimes, in the liminal space drifting towards sleep, a low hum seems to vibrate through the very walls of the house, a phantom resonance. My shoulders ache with perpetual tension. A gnawing fear persists. Reopening those channels might invite a stronger, more terrible return. The nightmares haven't stopped. Sleep remains a battleground where the static revenant lingers, glimpsed in mirrors behind my reflection, standing silently in shadowed corners, always watching. I wake, soaked and shuddering, the phantom gaze clinging long after my eyes force themselves open. Will I ever broadcast again? The question hangs unanswered in the quiet dread that has become my companion. One part of me craves oblivion, escape from this solitary obsession that turned monstrous. Another part burns for understanding, for the identity, the nature of the thing behind the disembodied knowing. This entity, whatever it is, respects no boundaries, physical or spectral. It slips through the ether like a phantom, privy to my deepest history, my hidden self, unprovable, unshakable. Something fractured within me. That night, the voice first spoke my name. Even sunlight offers no true solace now. Ordinary shadows seem to lengthen unnaturally. Familiar sounds make me jump. I recount this tale not for solution, but for relief, lest the silence and the unshared fear consume me entirely. I heard a voice on the radio that shouldn't exist. It called me by name. It told me secrets locked away in the deepest vault of my being. It found me no matter where I fled on the dial. And now it resides in my dreams, perhaps in the static between thoughts. I can no longer pretend everything is normal. I feel its presence coiled within the background noise of the world. An unseen listener, patient, perhaps waiting for me to transmit again, to respond. Whether I ever will, I cannot say. But this certainty remains, cold and hard. I tuned into something that night far stranger than any earthly signal. Something that lodges itself in the mind, a parasitic resonance that refuses to fade. Some signals, I now know, carry more than sound. They carry something that crawls inside and makes a home in your fear.